So right at the top, let's talk about Quixel Bridge. So when you're in Unreal, so in this case Unreal 5, we can go up here and we can say go to Quixel Bridge, and it'll bring up this window here, and you may say, okay, let's go to 3D Assets, Nature, Rock, Boulder, select one you like, and you can choose what quality you want, low, medium, high, Nanite, and then you go in here to the settings menu, and you got some Megascan settings, but this is just really quick access for throwing things into Unreal. However, if we close that out and minimize Unreal, there is also just a Quixel Bridge you can install as a standalone program. And when you go into this version, Boulder, there you go, 3D Assets, Nature, Rock, Boulder. Now if we scroll down, find one you like, you go ahead and click it. Same kind of look, however, when we go down here to resolution, now you have 2K, 4K, and 8K, so if you want the highest resolution, go ahead and hit 8K. If we go in here to settings this time, there's download and export settings. So when you download this object, it's going to download a bunch of source files, and when you export this object, this is like a bridge where you can send it to Max, Maya, Moto, Blender, Cinema 4D, or Unreal, or whatever you want to send it to if there's a bridge for it. So we'll go to download settings here. For the textures, these are all the textures it's going to download and what format, and then underneath models, if we scroll down, you're going to see one of the extras for this object is a source ZTool. So now your high poly source is going to be like a decimated, maybe a million polygon version of this, which if you're in Unreal 5 and you use the bridge, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get the kind of the decimated Nanite version. The source ZTool is going to be like 18 million polygons. So this is the full resolution geometry, and then of course you can add your textures from there. So we have here textures. Let's go back, and again, if you want to send this to something, you can go in here to export settings, and you can say, you know, export it to whatever you'd like. So, and also the texture and the model information you want to send over. In this case, we're just going to download it. So we're going to say download. All right, and once it's done, this will light up, and I'm just going to go up here to this little 3 dots here, and I'm going to say go to files. That'll open up a Windows Explorer right to all the things it just downloaded, and you're going to see a ZTool in that folder. So if you double click that or open up ZBrush and load up that ZTool, so in this case we'll go in here to load tool, this directory into the open dialog box. There we go, there's our ZTool. Drag that in our canvas, go into edit mode, and now we have that full resolution version of that rock. This one's 17 million points, so we're in good shape. The texture information in here, if we go, I guess you just do sort by size. There you go. LOD 0 is probably your best bet. That's the normal map, however. Here's the 8K albedo. So we'll go ahead and add that to the ZBrush. Let's go in here to texture, import, and we'll double click this again, 8K albedo. And there's something funky about ZBrush. You got to go in here, texture, with that texture selected, hit flip vertical. And if we go down here to texture map, if you do it just to create new from UV check, you'll see that yes, in fact, this piece of geometry here has beautiful UVs, no overlapping UVs. So if we go in here and we can say apply that texture, there we go. Let's go in here to Skin Shader 4, Material, Modifiers. Let's take this diffuse, set it to 1. And you know what? Rock's usually pretty rough, so I'm going to take this specular down a little bit. So there we go. We have our 16 million polygon rock in here with our texture applied, and you're good to go. Now, I don't know, I think there's some caveats to what files are included with a ZTool. I think most big Megascans include a ZTool. Some of the smaller ones may not. The rest of this video is going to be if you're starting in Unreal and you just want to export from Unreal Engine into ZBrush, we're going to go over that process. However, because that is from the Nanite mesh, that's only going to be a decimated million polygon version, which you'll find out is okay. But if you want the full 16 million polygon resolution of the asset, this would be the way to go about it. All right, let's have some fun with Nanite. So I've launched Unreal Engine. I'm just going to go to Games, Blank. We'll turn off starter content. We'll name this Nanite Fun, and we'll hit Create right on our desktop. And now that we're on UE5, I'm going to go to the little add up here, Quixel Bridge. Let's go in here to 3D Assets, Nature, Rock, and let's grab some boulders, or a boulder. So I'm just going to scroll down until I see a cool one. This one looks pretty cool. We'll do a sandstone boulder, or maybe this one next to it. Yeah, this sandstone boulder we'll take in. We'll go ahead and say change the quality to Nanite, say download. Click Add to add it to our project. We'll go ahead and close the bridge window, and you'll see it's added it to our project. If you don't have this docked, so you got the content browser here and it's not docked, you can hit Control Spacebar, and that'll bring up the drawer. And then I'm going to say Dock and Layout, so it's always down here. So we're under Content, Megascans, 3D Assets, Sandstone Boulder. If we drag this into our level, we'll see I have our nice Nanite version. We can go up here to Lit, Nanite Visualization. We'll say Triangles, and here's the beautiful Nanite mesh. However, if I go back in here to Lit, if we were to right-click this right now and say Asset Actions Export, and again, we'll just go ahead and drop this right on our desktop here, just say Save, Export. And let's go ahead and do that for the color map as well. Just right-click the color map. Again, Asset Actions, Export. And again, we'll just drop that right onto our desktop. And if I go to my desktop, you're going to see, here's my 8K HDR image. That looks about like the right size. This one seems suspiciously low. I don't think that's the real full version of the geometry. So in order to get that, I'm going to right-click this Nanite asset. We're going to go up here to Nanite Disable. It might take a second. It's going to disappear maybe for a minute, but what it's going to do is convert the Nanite mesh to a static mesh. And then when I go to export it after that, conversion, so it just blinked right here, so we can right-click Asset Actions Export. And now we'll change this from high, vary it to, say, full. Go ahead and save that as an FBX. And now you can see, here's the full version of the FBX. That's 169 meg, and our original was a meg. So I think this is the full geometry version. So now that we have that, we'll just hop over into ZBrush, go in here to Tool, Import. And we'll go ahead and bring in both of these just so we can see the difference. So I'm going to double click the full, go ahead and hit OK. And we'll go grab, we'll click off of this, we'll click on this Polymesh 3D so we don't import over this one. So we'll go ahead and say import. And we'll grab the smaller version, say OK. And now when I drag this out, you're going to see here is the original version when we had Nanite enabled. And then this is the version where we have the full geometry scan. So I'm going to go to this one here. We can say Subtool and delete. Just get it out of our ZBrush session here, and now we have a nice high-res version. Now if I go down here to Texture Map, Create, New from UV Check, you'll see it's got UVs on it, no overlapping UVs, everything's gray, there's no red, so we're good to go. However, we don't have the texture. Now if I go in here to Texture Import, and we import that 8K HDR image, ZBrush will import it, but it won't allow us to do much else with it. So we can select it, but we can't flip it vertically, which is really what we want to do. So I'm going to hop into Photoshop really quick. Double click here. We'll grab that HDR image, or you can just drag it into Photoshop if you'd want. And then I'm going to go in here to Image, Mode, 8 bits, and let's switch this over to Exposure and Gamma. Hit OK. File, Save As. We'll throw it on our desktop. You can do it as a PSD, a JPEG, a PNG, whatever you want to do. I'll just save it as a JPEG for now. Say OK. And then back in ZBrush, if we go in here to Texture, Import, you can grab the JPEG, select it, go in here to Flip Vertical, and it's an 8K texture, so give it a second. And once that's done, we're going to go down here to Texture. The texture is on, but it has this UV check. Let's go ahead and swap this out just by clicking on the icon there, and we'll swap that out with our sand. And now let's change our material so we can see a little bit better. We'll say Skin Shader 4, and in fact, let's go up here to Material Modifiers, change that Diffuse to 1, and now we have a rock with our textures applied that you can do all sorts of cool stuff with. So we have geometry, we have a texture. I'll link you in the description to a cool Dave Ancira YouTube video that'll go through how to make your own cliff faces using photogrammetry, or in this case, Megascan. So if we duplicate this off, hit the subtractive icon, go to Live Boolean, hit W, you can use another rock to kind of dig in to another face and kind of create variants like that. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete, and we'll turn Live Boolean off. And let's talk about a couple ways where we can capture some of this height information and create our own rocks. So if I go to maybe this site over here, just looking for a nice place to kind of grab texture and height information. Now if I scroll up and go into our palette here, you're going to see there's an MRGBZ Grabber. So if I click that, it's going to want to drop everything to our canvas. Say always switch, it's totally fine. If I start dragging out, you see we can start capturing an area. If you hold down Shift, that'll constrain it to a square. Then we can go ahead and just capture this information. It'll put it into alpha height information, and then also texture information. In fact, for that texture information, let's switch. Let's go ahead and hit Control N on our canvas to clear our canvas. Let's drag this back out. Sorry about that. set this up again, and we'll switch this to a flat color. So that way we're just grabbing the color information and the height information. Yeah, so that should work. So I'm going to go, again, back in MRGBZ Grabber. Since we said always drop, it went ahead and dropped it to our canvas for us. And again, I'm going to drag here, hold down Shift, and we'll just capture this area. Control N to clear our canvas. And just to test this out, we'll go grab a Sphere 3D, drag it into our canvas, go into edit mode. We'll swap this out with maybe matte cap gray as the material. Say make Polymesh 3D so it's editable. We'll hit Control D a bunch of times until we're up to about 2 million polygons. That's just geometry divide is all we're doing with Control D. And then now, let's take our standard brush, we'll clone it off, so we can always go back to our usual standard brush, and we'll just clone it to a little copy down here. It'll shoot it down to the bottom of your brush menu. Dot stroke will change to drag rect. Alpha, we'll grab that depth grab we've got, and the texture, we'll just grab that last texture that we grabbed. And now, we'll turn on RGB, and then under Subtool, we'll turn on Colorize. And now when we drag this out, we can drag out height information as well as texture information. If you just want to drag out height information, you can just turn Colorize off, and you can just turn the texture off. But with Colorize off, it just won't apply that. And now you can see we're getting that height information. If you want to make it a little more contrasty, you can go in here to Alpha. We'll just dock this over here. Underneath Modify, there's an Alpha Adjust. Just drag this little point in the middle. You just click in here and just it'll create a new dot, and you can just drag it in, and now you'll have a little bit more of a contrasty height information. Again, you can turn on Colorize, have RGB turned on, and while you're dragging out your height information, you can drag out your color information. Now you're going to see where the alpha is darker, it's not going to drag your texture information out. If you want to avoid that, just turn off this little A button here, and now you can drag out all of the texture information along with, if we turn off this, along with that height information. Now, when we capture that height information, we also captured a little bit of, like, if it was a round boulder, it would capture the curvature of the boulder because it's just a round boulder that you're capturing height information from. If you want to avoid that, we can go back to our rock here, and we'll switch this back to Skin Shader 4 so we can see a little better. And because we have UVs, if we want to flatten this out and capture data from the flattened version, we can go over here to UV map, morph UV. That'll morph it to a flat version of the rock. And so now we can go through here. Let's pick another area. We'll pick this area over here. Go ahead and make it fill our screen a little bit. And we can go in here to, again, MRGBZ Grabber. We'll start in the middle, hold down Shift. We'll go ahead and capture this whole area. We'll hit Control N to clear our canvas. We'll go back to our Sphere 3D we were playing with. Oh, I'm sorry, the PM Polymesh Sphere 3D. We'll go back to Startup Material, or in your case, matte cap gray, so we can see a little bit better. And again, with our brush standard 1 loaded, we'll swap out this alpha here to the new depth grab, and then our texture to this RGB. And now you're going to see our alpha doesn't have a whole lot of information. It still has that adjust built in, so we're going to say alpha adjust. Just hit this reset so it's back to flat. And so now we have our flat version of our height information as well as our brush texture. So you can drag that out. And now we're getting our height information, and of course, if we want our color information, just make sure RGB is turned on and Colorize is turned on, and we'll switch this back to Skin Shader 4, and now you can grab color and height information at the same time to just, you know, create your own rock if you'd like. Now, this is just Polypaint information on this one, so if we go down here to Polypaint, we can say adjust colors, and you can go through here and change the RGB intensity and say okay, and now your RGB map is however you'd want it to be. You can also do it at the texture level. So we have this texture loaded. So if we go in here to texture, with that one selected, you can go in here and adjust those colors. So we'll crank up the RGB intensity. You could even do like a hue shift or saturation. You can crank the saturation up and down, RGB, contrast, all that kind of stuff. Hit OK. And now that that texture's been updated, you see it turned a little bit lighter. Now when we use this, it'll just be a little bit of a lighter texture. So feel free to adjust the Polypaint after the fact and or the textures while you're working on it. In fact, if we go back to our sandstone boulder and we say, hey, let's go back to UV map, morph UV off, so it's just back to being a regular old boulder, we can even go in here to texture, and this is the texture that it's using. You can select it, go in here to adjust colors. Again, it's an 8K map, so give it a second. And then RGB intensity or whatever you want to change, you can change that, say OK. And then when we go in here to our texture map, you can say texture is on, and we'll just update that to the newer, brighter texture. There we go. So we got our boulder, we got height information, we have texture information. We can convert that to height information and texture information, which can be applied as a polypaint to another object. Now, this is a piece of geometry with UVs and a texture applied. If you want to make this a little bit more flexible, one thing you can do is you can go in here to geometry, divide. I'm going to turn off the smooth modifier. We're going to divide this up a couple times. It went from subdivision level 1 is 500,000, subdivision level 2 is 3 million. We'll divide it one more time. Now we're up to about 12 million polygons. So now what I can do is take this 8K information and transfer that to the Polypaint or to the vert data on the objects. We're going to take all those millions and millions worth of verts and apply this RGB information to those verts. So it's a Polypaint, and that'll kind of free us up to kind of do some crazier geometry changes if we want to. So we'll go over here to Polypaint, and we'll say Polypaint from texture, and again it's going to transfer that texture map information. You see it turn the texture off. The texture is no longer on. It is now Polypaint data. And if we zoom in, we still got a lot of, I mean, it may not have transferred 100%. You may need another subdivision to get the full 8K resolution, but not terrible, right? There's still plenty of data here to work with. So now, again, we have a piece of geometry that's just Polypaint. So now if we go into subdivision level 1, you'll see the quality drops. But as we go back up in the geometry, all of that texture data is now transferred to Polypaint data. If you want, you can also go in here to Geometry Dynamesh, and with Colorize turned on, again, Colorize is this little button right here, that little paintbrush icon. If you drag out from your Dynamesh onto your object, it will sample the resolution. So it's dialing in the resolution for me. It is kind of jumping around a little bit, and really I don't know if we would need a full 12 million points for this Dynamesh, but what you can do is we'll turn off blur down to 0, turn project off. With that resolution, we can hit Dynamesh. We always hit no on that. We just want to have a Dynamesh. We don't want to turn on free subdivision levels. So now it dropped it down to 6 million, but now it's a Dynamesh, and it's still, the Polypaint's still applied. But if we want to revert back to pre-Dynamesh, we can just grab our undo history to get back to our original object here. So now one more time, real quick, we'll just go ahead and make a quick rock. Again, we'll go to UV map, Morph UV. We'll use our MRGBZ Grabber to grab a section here. We'll hit Control-N on our canvas to clear it. We'll go back and drag out our mesh here so we can say UV map, unmorph our UV to turn it back into a rock. We have our standard brush here. We'll go ahead and clone off. I restarted ZBrush, so we lost our original brush here, but no big deal. We'll go in here to Alpha, grab our depth grab our RGBZ grab. Again, if we want to change this right off the bat, we can say texture with that one selected, adjust colors. We'll go ahead and crank up that RGB intensity just a little bit here. Say OK. Let's go grab a sphere primitive, and we'll say make polymesh 3D. We'll hold down Control Shift. We'll grab our knife curve, and we'll just kind of slice up a nice rock shape. Let's go in here to Geometry Dynamesh. Let's hit the comma key, go in here to Brush. Let's go in here to Trim, Smooth Border. We'll put a square alpha into the Trim Smooth Border brush. You know what, we'll drop that Dynamesh resolution down just a little bit here. And we can go in here with Trim Dynamic, Trim Smooth Border, H-Polish, whatever rock type brushes you want to use to go through here and kind of give it just a rocky shape. And if your rock geometry starts getting a little bit nuts, you can just Control drag to re-Dynamesh, and that'll redistribute that geometry. And I'm just kind of tapping along with my Trim Smooth Border brush. We're not doing anything super fancy or special, just trying to break up the surface a little bit. There we go. We got a rock shape. Let's go ahead and hit B on our keyboard. We'll grab that standard 2 that we made that has the brushes loaded. We'll switch this again to drag rect. We'll turn on RGB for this brush. We'll go in here to Subtool, we'll turn on Colorize, and then now when we drag this out, we'll get our height information. Again, we'll turn off the A so we can get the full texture applied. And we can go ahead and start dragging this out. Another thing too I should mention, if we turn Colorize turned off, you know, this is the result we're getting. If you don't want it that detailed, you can take that Z intensity down a little bit. Alternatively, if you turn the Colorize off, you can go back in your history to where you first started painting, hold down Control and tap, and then go forward in history, and you can say adjust last, and you can actually adjust that height information down. Now it's doing the color and the height. If you turn Colorize back on, you'll see it's kind of faded, but I just wanted to throw that out there just in case you wanted to control that. You could also be doing all of this in a layer. So if we go down here to layers and just make a new layer, and then I'll go to this side over here, Again, we start dragging this out, and again, we'll go ahead and turn on colorize. So as we're dragging this out, we can go through and drag it out, and then we can turn off record, and then we can adjust that as well. And let's go over here and we'll switch this out to skin shader, and I'll go ahead and say bake all, so all the layers are on there. So again, we can just go through here and very quickly just kind of stamp that height information. And one more thing I should mention, if you go in here to BX, there's the extractor brushes. So you take your extractor brush and you want to like sample something from like this area here, you hit G on your keyboard, just drag along here. And actually, before we do that, hold down Control and click the latest point in history, and then hit Control again. We had a weird point in history that we stored, so I'm going to store the latest version of history. Again, just Control click in your history line here, and then again hit G. We'll capture this little section right here. That's going to grab an alpha and a corresponding texture, and then you can use this to kind of go through and take height and color information and put it elsewhere.